At the end of last year, Michael Saylor shared one of his best analogies I've ever heard about Bitcoin. I think it is one of his most powerful clips, so I'm going to play it for you right now. After that, I will add some additional commentary. Here's the clip.
But I think where people trip up with your language is this idea of the inevitability of the 60%. What would you say to that?
So we're dealing with three concepts: risk, volatility, and performance. Okay, so I've addressed the risk issue by pointing out that there is existential risk in your given network or frame of reference. And I just want to make that point that once you understand that risk of being in that frame of reference, then you have to figure out what's the source of the volatility and the performance. And if you don't understand why the asset does what it does, if you don't understand the economic physics involved, then you'll think it's random and you'll feel like the performance is risky. But I want to give you an example of a physical metaphor. I'm a hiker and I come across a mountain lake, and the mountain lake has 500 trillion gallons of water in it. And yeah, I don't know how it got there, but it's there. The water's chilly, it's clear. And I look down and there's a waterfall coming off the mountain lake. And the waterfall, it's very beautiful and it's very turbulent, right? Water is turbulent in a waterfall. Water is not turbulent in a glassy lake. So the turbulence is volatility, right? And there's waterfall. And then I look at it. And now if you look and you say, I don't know why that water falls downhill. I don't know if it'll keep falling downhill, but I hate the volatility. Then I guess you can take a selfie in front of the lake, go swimming, get cold and leave. But let's say you're not a tourist, but you're an engineer. So you come across the same lake and you see the waterfall and you see the 500 trillion gallons and you think about gravity and you think about sunlight. And now I know how the water got there. The water got there because the sun shone on the ocean. The water evaporated from the ocean. It rose up in the clouds. The wind blew it against the mountain. It condensed and it rained into the mountain, and the water ran off the mountain into the mountain lake. I know how it got there. And then I think, well, if I create a dam near that waterfall, I build myself a dam, I put a turbine on the dam, and then I drop 1 billion gallons of water. I channel 1 billion gallons of water through the dam, drop it 60 feet. And then I plug that into a hydroelectric power plant. I spin the dynamo. I make electricity. And then if I'm really smart, I run the electric power line to a village down in the valley, and I light up the village or I light up the city. Now, someone can come along that doesn't understand physics, and they can say, good idea, Junior, but what are you going to do when the water stops flowing downhill? Well, I'm like, I actually think the water's flowing downhill because of gravity. Newton solved that for me. And then someone else comes along and says, good idea, Junior, but what are you going to do when you run out of water in the lake? I'm like, well, there's 500 trillion gallons, and I take out my calculator and 1 billion gallons or whatever. It's going to last a long time. Like, well, it's eventually going to run out. I say, well, the sun keeps shining on the ocean, and the ocean keeps lifting the water out of the ocean, and it drops it on this mountain. And that's why there's water in the mountain. But you're right. There's some kind of natural limit. And I suppose there's a limit to the amount of energy I can pull off of this dam, but it's a large number. It's a lot more than your donkey cart, and it's a lot more than your steam, wood stove, and it's a lot more than your coal power plant. And maybe it's a lot cleaner than burning, gasoline. So I'm an engineer, and you're seeing performance thinking it's random, and that's why it's going to stop. And you're seeing volatility and you're thinking it's random and maybe it'll stop. And here with Bitcoin, the reason Bitcoin's performing is A, it's volatile, but B, it's a more energy efficient state. The water is flowing down 5,000 feet because it's a lower energy state 1,000 feet below the mountain. It's a lower energy state. You've got potential energy in the water and it wants to go to ground, and that's just physics. The 500 trillion gallons of water is $500 trillion. And the $500 trillion of assets are sitting in real estate and currency and sovereign bonds and corporate bonds and artwork and equity. And they're invested in the stock of a company in Africa that's going bankrupt, right? They're invested in real estate in Cuba, in Venezuela, in Nigeria. They're sitting in a warehouse that's crumbling. It's got a 40-year life. And so entropy and inflation, you invested $100 billion in a war zone, and then a war broke out and your asset got devalued. All of the things going on in the world, the war, the chaos, the competition, the inflation, the entropy, the passage of time, the hurricane, the COVID, vaccine, the COVID virus, all of these things impaired the value of your assets. The reason Bitcoin is going up, it's not an accident. It's because capital is economic mass. It is flowing from a high energy state, the mountaintop, to a lower energy state, to a more efficient state. It is steam condensing to water, condensing to ice, giving off energy, just like in any chemistry lab, you would learn this.
One of the main reasons I really love this clip is because the interviewer, Tom, frames the question as kind of a gotcha question. He suggests that Saylor's language often makes Bitcoin sound inevitable, which feels like an impossible position to defend. After all, nothing is inevitable, including Bitcoin. But Saylor's response is brilliant. He breaks it down into risk, performance, and volatility. And the way he explains it is incredibly logical. First, he briefly addresses risk, acknowledging that yes, Bitcoin faces existential risk. Cryptography could be broken, there could be a nuclear holocaust, aliens could come down to Earth. Those things are technically possible, but they are also existential risks for humanity itself, not just Bitcoin. By pointing that out, he moves past the question of risk without dismissing it entirely. Then he shifts to performance and volatility, where he delivers what I think is one of his most powerful analogies. Saylor compares capital flowing into Bitcoin to a waterfall connected to a lake, a massive, almost unimaginable reservoir of wealth and capital. The waterfall represents the volatile movement of that capital as it flows into Bitcoin. Now, when you see a waterfall, you don't think, wow, this is unsustainable. You instinctively understand that water flows downhill because of gravity, kinetic energy, and potential energy. It's just physics. The flow may look chaotic, but it is completely logical, and the same is true for Bitcoin. Capital is flowing into Bitcoin because Bitcoin is a superior monetary asset with the most superior monetary properties. And if you take a step back and look at the last 16 years, it is undeniable. The waterfall has been flowing for 16 straight years. Bitcoin's price has grown at an astonishing 100% compound annual growth rate over that time. That is not speculation, it is historical fact. You are literally watching this flow of capital happen in real time. And why is it happening? Markets and individuals are actively choosing to allocate more capital to Bitcoin because it is a better form of money. It has unique monetary properties. It is scarce, portable, durable, divisible, and fungible. These qualities make it ideal for preserving wealth over time. Bitcoin is the only asset that cannot be perpetually produced or devalued by free market competition. If you hold wealth outside of Bitcoin, you are betting that the market will not increase the supply of that asset or devalue that asset with competition. But that is a risky bet. Just like expecting a waterfall to stop flowing, you are fighting gravity in basic physics. And with Bitcoin, you are fighting market dynamics that are just as powerful. Ultimately, Saylor's analogy illustrates what is actually happening. It is not about making predictions, it is about watching reality unfold. For 16 years, we have seen capital flow into Bitcoin. And based on what we know about markets, incentives, and logic, there's every reason to believe that flow will continue. This is why I think it is one of the best analogies Saylor has ever used. It highlights Bitcoin's role as the natural endpoint for capital seeking long-term safety, stability, and growth, just like water flowing to its lowest point. Of course, it is volatile because everything is rapidly getting repriced in Bitcoin. The waterfall has existed for 16 years, and it is only getting bigger. Thanks for watching, everyone, and see you next time.